Molo Sanbonani, hello, how's it? Good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome to the Monday edition of Vuka Nazo. You can tell, of course, that I'm not in my makeshift studio. I'm out and about as we're compiling a story, an investigative piece that we're busy shooting at the moment. Remember, you can support the show and help me transition it, especially the Big Daddy Liberty show, towards being a bit more like Carte Blanche, where we do special investigative pieces and we hire the journalists here on the show who can help us do exactly that. How can you help? You're probably wondering. Well, find us on our website at www.bigdaddyliberty.com, and there, of course, if you scroll to the bottom, you can commit R100 a month towards helping fund the show and helping me, of course, hire those journalists and editors. Anyway, with that being said, enough with the jibber jabber. I may be in a different location, but let's get straight into the news. All right, we begin here this morning where an inductee of the Mumish of the Week, well, that chap, grinning, as you'll see in this piece, has been granted his freedom papers, so to speak, with the Department of Correctional Services coming out and basically saying, hey man, Jacob Zuma has served his 15-month stint in correctional service care. You remember he was effectively sent to prison by the Constitutional Court for his contempt of court, his opting, when demanded so, not to appear before court. Well, the court said off to jail with you, and that was short-lived after he was granted medical parole. In any event, that same department, the Department of Correctional Services, now saying, well, his time is up and he is a free, in inverted commas, man. Now, this piece I read did a very extensive write-up on this and basically said the following. Now, the spokesperson to the Department of Correctional Services, Usiba Ngumalo, basically saying Zuma had met all his conditions that were placed on him during parole, and that he had met all his conditions, and of course, that was the basis of his freedom. End of quote. Now, I raise this issue only because for me, it's almost laughable. It is almost laughable. We've spoken about this on the show before, where I mentioned to you that South African criminal justice system, from arrest to prosecution, if you're ever prosecuted, to imprisonment and being released, there is a two-tier justice system in this country, a two-tier justice system, one for the elites and the politically elite and the rich, and one for the rest of us, ordinary law-abiding citizens who, if we ever came in conflict with the law, would definitely not have the sort of same graces that we receive or that the political elites in this country receive. It is a shocking indictment on our justice system that Jacob Zuma, effectively having served a few days, if you will, in prison, miraculously got medical parole on the grounds that he was gravely ill, if anything, terminally ill, as is the basis for medical parole. And here he is, been gallivanting around, appearing in party political events, even standing for the national chairpersonship of his party in the upcoming December election. That guy has supposedly served his sentence. If I was a prisoner in this country who was, repaying my debt to society, effectively paying my dues and doing my time, I'd feel a bit aggrieved watching a one Jacob Zuma waltz out of prison after having spent a few days, if any, in prison. The system is fundamentally broken, as it doesn't punish in real terms the wrongdoers, and seemingly, if they're in the political elites, the rich or politicians, it rewards them. All right, now I take you to Mpumalanga, or just recently actually comments by SANParks, of course, the government entity meant to run all government national parks across the country. Its CEO, Ewan Hapilwe, I think is how you pronounce his name, Sello. You'll apologize to him if I mispronounced his name, but effectively he coming out and quite strongly and quite rightly seeing the writing on the wall. Fears, of course, by SANParks that there will be a myriad of cancellations by local and international visitors. This comes, of course, on the wake of the 4 German tourists who were ambushed in an attempted hijacking, presumably, outside the Mguli game park where, of course, one of those tourists was shot and killed. A rather tragic end to what was meant to be a very happy holiday for these German tourist makers. The CEO of the facility quoted in this News 24 piece is basically saying the Numbi Gate is quite problematic, and he advises, of course, that tourists use other entrances in so far as trying to get into that particular game park. End of quote. But effectively, for me, it's irrelevant as to which gate is used by tourists. You simply cannot have a situation where tourists and really, more importantly, local, everyday, law-abiding South Africans are held hostage by a crime, or rather by a country that is descending into a hell of criminality, where the criminally intent, the criminally minded, the evil, the vile, and the most violent rule the roost. They literally live a better quality of life insofar as being bold, being free to roam and move as they please. It's unacceptable, pardon me, that they live a better quality of life. They're freer, they're more at ease, if you will, than us, the ordinary law-abiding citizen, the sane, sober, moral, prudent type South African, where, again, nothing absolves the state, which has made it their responsibility, nothing absolves the state, led by, of course, a one asshat of a police minister, from their duties to render law and order in our society, to provide safety and security for ordinary citizens, including, by the way, tourists who come to this country at great cost in most cases in order to spend their hard-earned money to provide jobs in this country. One has to remember that old statistic that for every tourist in this country who arrives, international tourist comes and spends money here, 8 jobs in tourism are created in this country. So tourism is a massive, massive field which must be protected. So again, I do get the sentiments of SANParks, but if anything, it has to apply pressure to the state, that is its colleagues in the state, i.e. one particular minister of tourism, a annoying figure of Ulindiwe Sisulu, useless character as she is. They need to apply a lot more pressure to the likes of Ulindiwe Sisulu, the tourism minister, and of course the minister of police, uBheki Cele, to render that safety that is urgently required in the tourism sector. All right, now to more harrowing news, indeed a massive warning by the South African Medical Association. This piece, of course, that I find in EWN, where the association warns the following. The association has basically warned that in excess of nearly 40% of medical professionals are looking to leave the country, citing poor working conditions, end of quote. And even as I read that to you, I begin to say, this is not the first time, we've had this conversation on the show, where I've mentioned to you that professionals in this country, because of the sheer poor state that South Africa is in, are looking to leave this country. There is a massive cost that is borne by society when the people who are in charge of governance in your country are doing a bad job at it. People will literally head to greener pastures, especially if those people have critically and sorely needed skills, as is the case, of course, with medical professionals in this country. As to how government is responding to this is important, because at this stage you would expect them to be then pushing in place good policy, creating better working conditions, and even, as is actually sorely needed, as is proposed by me, privatizing the healthcare sector. These are the things that government should be doing to respond to a crisis like this one. However, is it what government is doing at the moment? No. This government, given the ideology of the political leadership in it, is looking to actually centralize more power within this field. That is, centralize power into the hands of the very same people who have corrupted and broken the public health sector. That is, the national health insurance as proposed by the ANC and supported by all leftist formations in government and in parliament, would be a system that literally exacerbates this problem and effectively sees such figures like the 40% cited by Sama rise to a much bigger number. No one wants to effectively become a slave to the state system. No one wants to become indentured labor, if I can frame it that way, to the same state system which is corrupting the current public healthcare system. So that this is the takeaway you should pick up from this particular story. We are at a crossroads, and indeed not even a crossroads, but rather a fork in the road, where if we continue to go one direction, i.e. more state control, more state decision making in the healthcare sector, whether it's the national health insurance or the limiting of where medical professionals can be trained to either universities or state facilities, and crowding out the private sector. If we continue heading in that direction, then woe is you and I, for the healthcare system as is already collapsing. However, if we go in the other direction where there's more privatization, including allowing the private sector whether to train nurses, doctors, or whatever the case may be, if you allowed a flourishing of that, and you transitioned from the state and politicians spending money to actually a situation where ordinary people empowered with health vouchers, the very same health vouchers that they could use to buy their own medical aid, if you moved in that direction of privatizing and empowering the individual, the citizen, then you have a chance, if you will, of not only saving the current healthcare system in this country, but growing it and increasing its quality. The choice, dear South African, as to which direction and which ideas is always going to be yours as a voting public. More state and statism, or more private options and placing power and resources into your hands, from the poorest to the rich. All right, folks, that's it from me for this, another edition of Vuka Nazo. Apologies once again for the makeshift environment. It is what it is. We are on the road shooting and recording, a investigative piece. Now, with that being said, remember you can find me on my website at www.bigdaddyliberty.com. And if you're watching this and you're wondering how to get in touch with me on social media, well, if it's on YouTube, the information is down there. There it is. And if it's on Facebook, it's up there. Find me, of course, on all your major social media websites. And, of course, last but not least, a reminder that we come to you weekdays from 7 a.m. So if you're watching this on YouTube in particular, do me a favor, subscribe to the show, hit that like button and the bell notification so that every weekday from 7 a.m. you're notified when it's time for Vuka Nazo.